Hey guys, just a couple quick things here. First of all, I know it's not really been obvious, but I've actually gotten hold of some proper editing software. Woo. Very much thanks to the individual who donated it. You know who you are, and you requested anonymity, so therefore you shall have it. Nevertheless, thank you a lot. It's nice actually being able to edit my videos. Even though I don't actually do a lot of edits, I'm not trying to be that kind of a show. It's nice to be able to do something with it. Second thing, I wanted to basically talk about a concept. This is going to be kind of a short discussion, but this is also a question. So for those of you who don't feel like watching the whole video, the question will be down there in the box for anybody who would like to respond to me. So some of you may have noticed that most of my videos up until now, well, I shouldn't say up until now because I kind of intend to keep doing this, but aren't really what I like to call conversation cut videos. For those of you who don't really know what I'm talking about, what I mean is when someone is basically kind of splicing the conversation up, and it's not even necessarily something that's, from different conversations. It's basically a kind of a thing where, even amongst the same sentence, I'm still doing the jump cuts back and forth. They're not actually jump cuts. That's an improper term. That's why I call them conversation cuts. See, for example, I could take this wonderful drink of water here. That was good. You get where I'm going with this. Now, I actually kind of want to talk about this a little bit before I get to the point. Forgive me. Three things, right? Three main reasons why people do this. I know some people like it, I know some people don't like it, but I just want to talk about this because the original reason, well, arguably, the first two reasons are debatably the first, depending on who you talk to, but the original reason, back in the day, people would do this sort of thing, and I'm talking, several decades ago, is because people like to talk like this when they really don't know what they're doing. You know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've seen it. My very first video, one of the first things I talked about way back, this is like 3.5 years ago now, was when I was going to have to get back into the habit of being on camera. Because, and I talked about this then, it's just a different mindset. Now, I was lucky. I've actually worked in television before. Yes, really, I have. As an editor, as a director, as a writer, and as someone on the screen. But you kind of have that mindset. It's a completely different mindset. And so you'd put someone wholly new on the camera, and they're not going to be accustomed to that. One of the things that results in is, sometimes it's sometimes it's but it's always that pause. Now, I want to talk about this for a minute because there's actually nothing wrong with that, okay? What it is two things kind of combined. There's some debate on this as far as the chemistry involved, but I'm pretty solid on this theory, but I will go ahead and say this is a theory. This is not absolute fact. What is happening is the brain of the person in question is moving at a specific rate, right? However, they'll hit think of it like a cycle. Okay, that's a couple of words, right? Now, most of the time, someone isn't accustomed to thinking about the next thing they're going to be saying because of point two. I'll get to point two because point two is kind of the catalyst, but point one is the important part. Point one is where this really comes in. They're not thinking about what they're saying ahead of time. They're not. Any of you who've actually done any kind of television work or acting or anything like that know what I'm talking about. You know what your next three lines are going to be when you're saying the previous ones. I'm doing it right now. I'm kind of rehearsing my lines and what I'm going to be doing for the next several sentences right now as I'm doing it. I'm actively displaying this. So that's how you try to avoid the and the because when you don't do that, hang on, I gotta actually kind of mentally switch here. Hey, you know what, screw it, I'll just fake it. When you don't do that, you kind of need to pause. That's actually what the is. It is literally and it gives your brain, it's literally a few milliseconds. It doesn't need more than half a second at the absolute most to catch up. And then it's like, okay, well, this is what I want to say next. That's why you won't just see it in the middle of sentences, or rather in between sentences, but you will see it in the middle of sentences as well. Now, the second reason, the catalyst I mentioned, is because of nervousness, camera shyness, whatever you want to call it. The mentality of being on camera affects you. Trust me, if you don't believe me for whatever reason, I have seen this a billion times. You could have two people have a conversation and they're rehearsing and discussing what they're going to be doing for a scene or whatever, and they're just in it in the moment because they're just kind of doing it. But the moment you put the camera on them, they know in their minds, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, that now they're on camera, and that nerve. It's the same concept. Let me give you an example. let's say I'm sitting here playing Final Fantasy VI because it's the best game frickin' ever. Final Fantasy VI. Hang on. There we go. Okay. Now, let's say I'm playing Final Fantasy VI, and I'm just did something incredible. I'm like, yeah, I just did you know, actually, I got a better example. I'm sorry. I really do have a better example, because this actually happened to me just a few weeks ago. Say I'm playing Twilight Princess, and I pull off the early sword skip. For those of you who don't know what it is, don't stress it, but it's actually a pretty hard trick to pull off, because it's kind of random, and it's pretty precise, relatively speaking. It's not frame perfect. It's like 3 to 6 frame perfect, but still. And I pulled that off, and I'm like, yeah, sis, check it out! And she's like, oh, dude, congrats. Can you show me how you do it? Sure! And then I failed 12 times in a row. My point is, we perform worse when we know we're being watched. And it is a mental hurdle, a adjustment in our mentality to get over that, to get over the nervousness, to get over the shyness, to get over the fact that we are being watched, because what we're secretly thinking, again, this is opinion at this point, because all that previous stuff is basically fact. From you get where I'm going. Not the chemistry part isn't fact, and this part isn't fact, but everything else is. But the point is, it is my opinion that we get that way because we fear we're going to be judged if we screw up. And so what our thinking about is, what our concentration is on, is the screwing up part. You see where I'm going with this? And so we perform worse, and it is a mental hurdle to get over that. In fact, one of the things I noticed several new streamers would have to get over, I should say, is the fact that, okay, now they're streaming, and the tricks and things and otherwise that they could do, they're not doing nearly as well, because now they know they're being watched. And now the pressure's on. It's very simple common psychology, and so forth and so on. Now I'm going to do a jump cut because I'm about to type something, which brings me to my second point. Yeah, see, I forgot to actually do the pose thing. There's actually a way to do that where, you know, you try to get the same pose, and it's obviously going to be a jump cut, but you don't want to do the exact same pose. Like, for example, if I was to do a jump cut to here, well, actually, if I was to jump, let me rephrase that. If I was to do a jump cut here, I don't want to just hold this position and then cut it out, because it's obviously going to be just a blip, and that's just distracting. What you want to do is make it flow. So I go from this, and then I jump cut to here, and that will demonstrate. I don't want to actually, I'm not going to edit this sequence, I'm just telling you what I'm talking about. Second reason, like I was just talking about. The second reason people started doing that, the whole conversation cut thing, is because people would flub and have issues and problems, and they'd be like, you know, for example, I'm going to not cut this section, but I'm going to demonstrate. I probably should have had something to read first. Lens cleaning wipes Tala Flimpia blah 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 blah. Okay. Lens cleaning wipes total limpia lente, because when you're actually recording, it's easier to just keep recording and edit out the flubs. And so people who perform have gotten used to this idea of, whenever they screw up a line, basically just rewinding themselves a few bit in the script or whatever they're talking about, and then continuing going. Musicians tend to do this kind of thing as well, actually, and song singers, song people. Anyways, I just did it just there because I wasn't thinking ahead. Now, that's kind of also related to the other reason, which is time. See, this is the other reason that is arguably the original reason. So I guess actually we're talking about 4 reasons here. The other arguably original reason is because anybody who has done any kind of video production of any sort, online, television, movie, whatever, doesn't matter, will tell you when you go out to record or film or whatever, you will have more material than you need, and in fact you'll have more material than you can fit. Both of those are problems. They're actually very separate problems when you think about it, because on the one hand, you have more than you need, so I've got tons of stuff to work with, and you know, all this is excess. But on the other hand, sometimes you have more than you can fit because you want more of it to fit in there, but you can't because you only got 41 minutes and 55 seconds in order to fit it in there. So you have to chop. And that's why people started doing that, is because sometimes, in order to make sure as much of the content stays in as possible, they would edit out. Well, I actually just kind of demonstrated that without really meaning to. You know, I paused, took a breath, and then continued talking, and they'll edit that breath out. It only saves about half a second, but you'd be surprised how much that saves as you go out across an entire video, especially one that's like 30 minutes or 40 minutes long or whatever. And they'll chop pauses in conversation, kind of like the pause I just did there, because it's natural to pause when you're talking, and that's one of the reasons why so many people in presentation either are or feel like they're talking non-stop. Sometimes it's editing, sometimes they've just gotten into the habit of it because that's kind of how it's supposed to come anyways. That's also one of the reasons why people tend to talk so quickly in general, is because they know they're on a time deadline, and their producers and their directors and their editors have let them know, you've got blah time. You want to talk about blah during that time, you got to cram it. You see where I'm going with this? So these two reasons mean that for the last 40, 50 years, this has been going on for a while, this kind of editing technique is actually pretty commonplace. Now we're going to talk about the last point. Why it's so commonplace now on, for example, YouTube and other such, online shows. Any online show, really. I'm talking both at the professional, the semi-professional, and the amateur level. At all of these levels, people do these conversation cuts because it's become such a commonality thing that it's actually become style. Expected or customized style, or whatever you want to call that. There's actually probably a proper term for that. I don't know, to be completely honest with you. I like to call it expected style, because what it is, and this is, again, I could do a whole video about just this other topic. I keep doing this. I could do a whole video about this topic by itself, but basically, the idea here is that because A has happened so often in order to emulate B, after a certain period of time has passed in public consciousness, A is associated with B, even though A and B really aren't the same thing. I got an example for you right off the top of my head. Pirates, okay? Do you really think pirates talked like that? No, of course they didn't. I'm sorry, but no. Do you think that they acted that way, or there was this glorious life, or anything like that? Now, I'm not even talking about the romanticization in, for example, Pirates of the Caribbean, which is beautifully romanticized, and I mean that sincerely. It's a great series of movies. I'm talking about the fact that it's actually considered acceptable commonality when you get below that layer, how pirates were, but even that is still an exaggeration. Let me give you another example. Mark Twain. Mark Twain's voice has actually been recorded and then deleted. From my understanding, I didn't do a lot of research about this topic, but to my understanding, that original recording has been erased, and we no longer have access to it. So we no longer have Mark Twain's voice. I don't remember his full name. Samuel Clemens, I think. Anyways, we no longer have his voice in recorded history. It's gone. But what we do know as a result of these events is that it is not the voice we have come to expect for it. I forget the name of the gentleman, but one gentleman did a impersonation of Mark Twain once upon a time. This is many, many years ago, obviously. And that kind of became the definitive thing that was associated with Mark Twain. And if you look at just about any presentation of Mark Twain across any fiction, where it's audible, of course, you're going to hear the same general cadence of performance, because that's what is associated with B. Even though that's not actually what he sounded like, which again we know, because you get where I'm going with this, right? So my point is, these kind of conversation cuts have basically become associated in public consciousness with professional production, with television production, video production, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And that's why people keep doing it now, and this is the fourth reason. Style. It has become an aesthetic. It's become something, that we actually do on purpose, specifically to have a stylistic intent. And that brings me to my question. Obviously, I do intend to do some editing for my videos. Even this video I did just now, aside from the editing I was doing to make a point, I have actually edited a few things out. For example, the cat came in and wanted scritching, so I decided to go ahead and pause and scritch him. I had to sneeze, a couple of little things like that. Okay, but obviously I'm also going to be doing some other editing. For example, I've been working for the last several weeks on intros and outros for my videos, and that takes time and effort. Anybody will tell you editing is a long and time-consuming job. The question is, do I start editing my actual ruminations, me just sitting here talking like I'm doing right now? Now, I'm going to try and go ahead and give you an idea of what that's like. So, I'm going to read the same basic thing twice in a row. Now, this is an excerpt from something some of you may recognize. I should have had it up earlier because I'm stupid. There it is. So I'm going to read this same section. Now I'm just reading a script here, but I'm just doing this to make a point. I'm going to do it first in what I would do my normal style of, just doing my ruminations. Dressed in his old and faded white lab coat, the man snipped the last wire with a pair of electrical wire snips. He looked up from his work to the luminescent clock on the wall across the lab. 3:34. Blast! He hadn't meant to work this late. Still, it was worth it. The job was done. Below the Santa clone, lying on the table, was what appeared, by all rights, to be a man. His hands were a work of art, if the old man dared say so himself. The raven black hair looked completely natural, although it might be shot through with highlights of midnight blue in bright sunlight. Large, piercing blue eyes regarded the man sightlessly in a well-proportioned face. Okay, now, I'm going to go ahead and do this a little bit differently and edit it in post so you can get an idea of what this would be like. Dressed in his old and faded white lab coat, the man snipped the last wire with a pair of electrical wire snips. He looked up from his work to the luminescent clock on the wall across the lab. 3:34. Blast! He hadn't meant to work this late. Still, it was worth it. The job was done. Below the Santa clone, lying on the table, was what appeared, by all rights, to be a man. His hands were a work of art, if the old man dared say so himself. The raven black hair looked completely natural, although it might be shot through with highlights of midnight blue in bright sunlight. Large, piercing blue eyes regarded the man sightlessly in a well-proportioned face. So that's kind of, hopefully I'll get across a decent idea of what the difference would be between the two styles. So you let me know, which do you prefer? I'm okay with either. You know, I'm trying to step up my production values just a bit since, well, honestly, I'm kind of excited about this whole Patreon thing. It's working out a lot better than I thought it would, and I'm really trying to push for this. So, let me know, and I will see you on the flip side. Wait, hang on. I just realized, there is one other thing, really quick. I can, of course, add music to my videos now. Now, this is always kind of going to be a double-edged sword, because whether or not a song is flagged and removed from YouTube at this point in time is kind of a 50-50 thing. It's actually complicated. For those of you who don't understand or don't care, I'm not going to detail it for you, but the long and the short of it is any video I put up, even if I put it up without ads, even if I put it without monetization, even if I put it up with a different licensing, is going to have a threat of being removed if I put certain music in it. Now, for example, this very video, I'm going to go ahead and do this as a test. This very video, I plan on putting up some music here. Let's go ahead and put up this song right here. Hang on. There you go. Now you can hear it. You got that? Or maybe this song. Huh? Yeah, what do you think? Or maybe this song. Wow, that's an amusing little pick of songs. I'm actually going to go back and edit in the songs that came up on the iPod here, just for you guys. But anyways, you get the point. So, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you on the flip side.